Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Jets FM on the Our Lads Football Radio Network. I'm Greg DePalma along with Jan Levine. And Jan, thank goodness for the NFL and free agency, right?
You're not kidding. It's the only game in town, quote unquote. Although, most people will probably say who are big football fans, they feel that is the only game in general. But now they really and legitimately are pretty much the only game in town, with everything else being suspended. Between the two sides agreeing to a new CBA, and you can see from how close the vote was. I think there was less than 60 votes separating the yeses and the nos. That it wasn't necessarily a broad-based approval associated with the new CBA. But that means we will have more regular season football and less preseason football.
Yeah, and I don't like that, by the way. I don't. Now, of course, and I don't like it because of the fact that what I would prefer to have is I'd actually prefer to have 15 regular season games if you give me, more practices. I don't want less practices for these guys, which is what's happening now. They're taking away more practices. They're taking away more padded practices. The more practices you take away from these guys, the quality of play has diminished over the years as it is because of the lack of practices. Now they're taking more practices away. I don't need the extra game. I want better quality of play.
It's not hard to argue with that. I think we both have discussed in the past the lack of practice time, especially for the younger kids who come out either slightly earlier or are necessarily, not necessarily full-fledged and developed players. The additional practice, especially for the younger, the guys who are maybe coming from the smaller schools, those are kind of things you want to see. Offensive linemen need to build up continuity. The only way you do that is by playing together. And it's great to have the extra game, so maybe by the end of the season you'll have that continuity. But you garner that by playing next to each other day in and day out and practice in and practice out. The flip side is we both are quite well aware of what's gone on in terms of the issue with concussions and everything else, and the desire and the willingness to have less practices to reduce the potential head trauma and contacts is something that has to be taken into account. I don't know if there's a happy medium.
Yeah, no,
I don't know if necessary. I don't think adding the
padded
17th game is necessary. I don't think
just
the 17th game is that.
Don't have padded practices then. I have no problem with that. But that's what they're doing as well. They're not only taking padded practices away, they're taking practices away where there's no contact.
Agreed.
Come on. You're not going to get a concussion with no contact. And it's just a thing, too, when you get these kids that like, for instance, when Burrow gets signed, I'm sure he's going to be an eager beaver. He's going to want to be in the room on the phone with Zach Taylor as much as possible before camp begins, but he's not allowed to. And that's just those things just drive you crazy as a fan. And I get why they're doing it, because there's a certain percentage of players that want to have a life. They don't want football to be their life. They don't want to be forced, or, just because he went ahead and wanted to give you 30 extra days doesn't mean I have to. And if I don't, then I'm going to be looking like I don't care as much. And then you're going to say I don't want that guy. I want the guy that wants the extra 30 days. So I get that, but it still stinks. And I think there's got to be a way in the future to kind of remedy that.
Well, the problem has become, as you and I both know, the term optional hasn't always meant optional.
Yeah, I get
certain
that.
Teams,
yeah.
Right? So
sure.
Optional has become mandatory. So until you can make it truly optional and allow the players to dictate and drive to a certain extent to whether or not they want that contact, they feel the need in the NFL to make sure you're not forced in order to have that kind of contact. So again, it's one of those things where happy medium, and then even now with everything going on clearly with coronavirus and COVID-19, and obviously our prayers go out to anybody who may be ill and those who are unfortunately are caught up in this, and hopefully everybody stays safe and healthy and we were able to get past this as expediently as possible. We don't know what's going to be in terms of team contact and everything else, because you can't have gatherings to begin with right now. Practices are closed, facilities are closed. The draft right now is still going to go on, but you're not going to have fans as of right now.
Sure.
So all of this is still up in the air in terms of how we get past this. So right now, all the conversations we're having in terms of wanting the padded practices or non-padded practices are kind of moot until we get a real better sense in terms of what the schedule is going to be.
Well, again, just real happy that the NFL has not succumbed to the pressure of the optics, because that's all it would have been. That's all it would have been, is optics, because as you can see, They could look at all the deals that have taken place over the last few days. They could make these deals on the phone. So thank goodness the NFL did not cave in to the poor optics, and it gives us fans something, because we would have been really hyped up about this to begin with. But hey, you and me, we might have been also preoccupied with Vancouver and the Rangers and a playoff race. There's so many other things going on in the world of sports that might have preoccupied our time. But now it's all football, and I get why Jet fans are antsy. Certain Jet fans are antsy, but we've talked about it for months. I know that even the beat guys have wrote about it, and yet within a few hours, writers and fans, a certain amount of them, are already impatient, because it's not the old Jets that would go out there and sign these big deals in the first few hours and try to make headlines. So, yeah, you could say, well, we missed out on Conklin, we missed out on this, we missed out on that. Look, we knew this was not going to be the way that Joe Douglas was going to go at free agency. He brings in a tackle, George Fant, who is a decent player. They didn't have to overspend for him, $10 million a year. That's okay. I got no problem with that. And now the next question is going to be what they do with the rest of the offensive line, because we know how much that's going to dictate their first-round pick.
Well, I mean, a couple of things. So first of all, I am one who thought they should have gone out and signed a different offensive lineman. Again, there's still time. Like once Thuney ended up being franchised, that took a major player off the board who they really wanted. I mean, the story about Conklin is a couple of different views. One is if he didn't really want to come to the Jets. The other is the Jets weren't necessarily fully sold, although if you look at his deal, 3 years, $42 million, $30 guaranteed, compared to the viewpoint of that he wanted $18 million a year, I don't think it would have been a bad signing by any stretch of the imagination by getting him. Glasgow, $444 with about 26 guaranteed is another guy who would fit in well.
Come on, really? I'll have a good conversation with you with Conklin, but Glasgow, come on.
I could have understood them going for Glasgow. I mean, Fant. I mean, the difference is I'm not in love with Fant. He grades out independent. If you believe Pro Football Focus, he doesn't grade out particularly well. But what it ends up being is I don't think he's a starter. I think he's a nice swing tackle.
He's a starter.
I don't particularly view him as a starter, and hoping I'm wrong. And like I said, I got into a Twitter war with somebody yesterday. Look, Joe Douglas clearly knows offensive linemen way better than me. Doesn't mean I can't disagree with him in terms of my view of guys who they may want. Hopefully he's right. But right now, if you look at the deal the way it's structured, it really ends up being a 1 year, $9.25 million deal with a potential buyout the following year or the ability to retain him for a second year. Part of the determination as to whether or not he's going to be a starter is whether or not they bring back Alec Lewis, who they're supposedly talking about. There's other guards, and Wisniewski is another guy who they're interested in, is another guy they're potentially going to bring in. They're in on another guard or tackle who they're looking to bring in. And if they bring in, him as well as Lewis, those two guys may end up being your starters, with Fant end up being a swing guy because it doesn't look like
Fant is going to start. They don't pay a $30 million. And I know, like you said, it's a year. I get it. They're not paying a guy $10 million to be a backup.
Okay. Again, it all depends on what they bring around him. I still think they need lots of other fixes. And
of course they do. That's why we have to be patient.
And the other thing is that the one thing you and I both have to consider is the deal that Arizona made yesterday, which I think you and I both are probably kind of scratching our heads as to what in God's name Bill O'Brien is thinking to begin with. But by them being able to bring in Hopkins, that now probably changes their focus from wide receiver to offensive lineman, which potentially takes another offensive lineman off the board that we were kind of hoping the Jets were going to get at 11.
Well, look, that's the thing that he knows. The chances are either he's going to get the fourth offensive lineman out of that top four group, or he's not. And if he is, does he prefer who he thinks will probably be that fourth lineman in the group, or does he go after the best wide receiver in the draft? That's the debate that I'm sure they're talking about. And these are the things that are going to have to be ironed out as more signings happen over the next few weeks.
Absolutely. The other guard was Greg Van Rolen is the other guy they're looking into. And both guys have been mentioned fairly prominently. And
they still have Winters. We don't know what to do with Winters, though.
Right. We still have Winters. Right?
And by the way, let's keep in mind that Doga could easily be a guard.
Starter. No, he's gonna be a starter. I mean, he right now and probably Winter is Udoka is a definite starter, right? Around him, it still remains to be seen in terms of what they're going to do. It's been an interesting free agency in terms of, I mean, my opinion, and Greg, you can agree or disagree with me. I think Buffalo has definitely improved, and Miami, who needed the improvement, has really taken a lot of steps to improve their defense, which doesn't surprise us given who their coach is, because the coach has a defensive mentality, and I think both teams have substantially improved. I think Douglas went in with a limited amount of capital right now. They did get one offensive lineman. Hopefully they're in on two more, bringing back Lewis, who I thought they probably should have re-signed before we got to free agency. The same, in my opinion, with Brian Poole is another guy who I think they should have potentially brought back. I mean,
hopefully they do bring him back.
Hopefully, once Johnson is gone, that frees up hopefully another $11 million in cap room. That'll give them some flexibility in terms of spending. We knew they weren't going to be in the deep end on Jones, who went to Miami. We knew they probably weren't going to be, and Robert Quinn just got a boatload of cash in terms of his signing. There's been rumors about Jadeveon Clowney, who I don't think fits the Jets' budget of $20 million a year. But the one thing I will be surprised at a little bit, and you can give me your opinion, I really thought they were going to bring back Jenkins. I really thought that was a guy, and maybe they still do, that they were going to bring back Jenkins, and the jury's still out, and we have to kind of see what happens to Robbie Anderson, who now with Amari Cooper re-signing in Dallas ends up probably being the best wide receiver out there in the marketplace.
Again, it's all going to be dictated, and this is why I like the strategy of being patient, because what's going to happen is if these teams want to because look, obviously if Jenkins and Anderson were willing, and I would imagine that the Jets had some sort of conversation with these guys and said, look, this is what we're willing to pay you. And then it's up to, and of course they're going to go, well, it's my opportunity to be a free agent. I'm going to test the waters. And I'm sure whatever that number was is going to be lower than what they're more than likely lower than what is out there. And if they want to come to the Jets and come back to the Jets after they get a potential offer, then it's up to Douglas to decide whether or not it's an offer that is fair enough. And even though it was a little higher than they had hoped, well, you know what? We can't lose this guy. So I'm okay with that, because if these guys are going to get, look, all of the players, would we want Conklin? Would we want some of these players? Yeah, but they're all Jones. They're all being overpriced. That's what free agency is about. Mm-hmm. All these guys don't deserve the money they're making. So what you do is you come back to the point where you come into that secondary point of free agency, where not only are you going to be able to hopefully make some deals with players that are going to have to say, well, you know what, I had 6 teams that were interested in me, but they've all spent their money. So now I've got to go down a little bit and settle, say, for the Jets offer. And that's how hopefully Douglas will be able to take advantage of that. And there are players getting cut every day, good football players that are getting cut because certain teams just can't afford to pay them, because they've just spent X amount of dollars on these big prized free agents. So I like patience. And again, I know it's tough, but it's only been, I mean, the day starts what? The day starts in like 2 hours, right? An hour and a half, an hour and 10 minutes?
I believe so. So, yes.
So free agency hasn't even officially began yet. And that's why I think this is a fresh, nice approach that we have got. Look, if you are all in on Joe Douglas, and I think, look, I'm assuming we both are, and I think there's a decent amount of fans that understand what kind of guy, what kind of credentials he has. You just got to wait and see. And then we'll discuss how we believe he handled everything once the smoke clears, probably within a couple of weeks, because I think it's going to be fun. There's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of roster spots still out there for us. What do we got? We still got like about 20 players that we have to sign on the team.
Yep, agreed.
So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep, and there are players being waived. I mean, obviously the shockwaves got sent today, although it probably shouldn't be shockwaves in terms of the Tom Brady news, right? I mean, that's
you can't go anywhere on NFL Network every 30 minutes straight to talking about Tom Brady's leaving. We didn't know that was a possibility for the past 2 months when it led every NFL news story as it was. It's sickening. I mean, there's so many deals going out over the last few hours. And they can talk 30 minutes straight about Tom Brady, and they don't talk about all these other deals that are taking place. Tom Brady hasn't even signed anywhere yet. I don't know where he's going, but I'm glad he's out of the AFC East.
Well, I mean, you see that Bridgewater is going to the Panthers, is what it looks like. It looks like Rivers is going to the Colts. The prominent names have been, obviously, the Chargers has been one name with Rivers moving on.
Yeah, as long as Brady doesn't sign with the Dolphins.
I've heard the Buccaneers.
Yeah,
and
good
I've heard
for us.
The Bears, right? My view is I actually suggested
riddance.
that the Dolphins would be a very good fit, potentially, for Brady, because of the fact that the coach that came from New England there, they're improving. I don't think they're playoff contenders, but you never know what happens. But I think the Chargers and the Bucs are probably the two more prominent ones, and then probably the Bears is third. And
hey, wherever it's outside, that's good for us. He's gone.
Yep. And New England needs a quarterback. The 49ers, I've heard somebody postulated the 49ers, which
good for them.
Somebody's talked about trading Garoppolo back to New England and signing Brady. I'm like, why would San Francisco? I mean, other than the fact they're bringing him back home, Garoppolo signed for 7 more years. I really look. You and I both don't know how much Brady really has left in the tank.
All I care about, he ain't in the AFC East anymore.
Right, but just thinking about it from a football perspective, right? If you think about it from a team perspective, how much does Brady have left in the tank?
Who do you want? And we're going to have weeks to discuss this, and this might even be out of our grasp anyway. When Douglas, because let's say Douglas goes out there and signs another tackle. Right. That has starting caliber ability, then we know that he's fearful of getting the tackle he wants, and that's going to be a wide receiver more than likely. Even though I was shocked to see one mock draft still had Okudah on the table if the Jets wanted to take him. So I'm sure now all of a sudden he might even be saying to himself, well, you know what, maybe it will be between a wide receiver and a cornerback. That's another possibility as well. Would you rather have the fourth best lineman or your choice of CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy?
Well, I think it kind of depends on how you're how you're rating the offensive lineman, right? What may be viewed as the fourth best offensive lineman in the Jets' mind might be the first best offensive lineman, right? You have Wirtz, you have Thomas. We don't know how they rate those guys, right? So if let's say the
I'm not saying them, I'm saying you. What do you want?
I would love to have. Well, I'll answer it twofold. One, part of it depends on if Robbie Anderson resigns. Two, part of it depends on who else they add in free agency in terms of on the offensive line. But ideally, I would prefer the offensive lineman right now, given that I don't want to see Sam Darnold become a piñata, which has happened all too often the first couple of years. But if the guy who's there isn't the guy who they rate highly, at least compared to the other guys that have gone especially, then yeah, I'm definitely going for the best wide receiver out there, and I supplement in the second round with an offensive lineman.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. Like you said, we're not going to be able to figure any of this stuff out until all these other moves are made. Look, it's going to be a lot of fun following it all. You mentioned Jenkins. Will he return? Poole, will he return? Beecham might even still be a possibility.
Yep.
I think at this point, we still believe the Jets have got to get an impact offensive lineman. So whether that's a draft or some other move he can make in free agency or a trade, so far that hasn't happened. But it's going to be a lot of fun following the team. We'll be back on the air at some point over the next few days, possibly not until next week, depending on how patient Joe Douglas is. Let's hope he's not too patient, because we want to talk and we definitely want to start seeing players signed with the Jets. But either way, we'll talk again in a few days, and by then, I'm hoping we'll have a lot more players to analyze as we start to get closer to the draft.
Absolutely. I mean, it's we've seen the first blush, which we always see, and now I wouldn't say it's slow to a trickle, but it's definitely slow to a slightly lower stream in terms of how quickly it goes. But we will start to see players sign, and the hope is, like you said, is maybe some of the players who they want to bring back that they haven't re-signed yet, maybe we start to add some of those back to the fold and figure out what other needs we have.
By the way, should we cut Avery Williamson?
In my opinion, no.
Okay. Should we cut Brian Winters?
Depending on what else we do in free agency. So if you add 2 more offensive linemen, you bring back Lewis, you add Van Roten, and let's say you add Wisniewski, then you could potentially cut Winters. If not, then I probably would end up bringing him back for 1 more year.
All right, because those are the only 2 big deal guys. I mean, Roberts hasn't been cut yet officially, has he?
No, not yet. And
he'll be cut.
Neither's Tremaine Johnson officially, but he will.
I don't know what they're waiting for. I guess
Maybe
4
maybe I have
o'clock.
to wait until the official start, and then you probably see it.
Yeah.
So another as we're taping this, about another hour or so, we should see him hit the waiver wire.
Yeah, and we're stuck with Enunwa. So that's just the fact. Whether he plays or not, his contract's going to be stuck with us possibly for the next couple of years.
Could be.
So, all right, Jan, good to talk football with you again, but we have a lot more to talk about. There's so many things we didn't even have time for today, but that's why we're going to return in a few days and talk more Jets football here on Jets FM on the Ourlads Football Radio Network.
Sounds good. Stay tuned, guys. We'll be coming back with you for more over the next several days and several weeks.